The UFC has released their pound-for-pound rankings on their website following UFC 284. I'm going to tell you who is currently ranked number one and talk about the list in general in just 1 second here. But before I do that, make sure you hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit that notification bell. Those things really do help out this channel. My name is James Lynch, and I'm putting content on this channel almost every single day. Okay, the UFC, like I mentioned, updating their rankings. Aaron Bronstetter, my buddy from TSN, getting the screen grab there. And as you can see, featherweight champion Alex Volkanovski currently ranked number one. I know there's going to be some debate here because Volkanovski just lost this past weekend in the main event of UFC 284, but the fight was close. That's a key detail, I think, in why he is still ranked number one. Let me just say as well, I hate doing pound for pound talk just because I think a lot of it is very subjective. There's a lot of different ways you can analyze that. So this is a tricky situation. It's tricky to sort of decipher who should be number one, who shouldn't. I'm going to give you my point of view on how I would sort of rate this. And I don't really have a huge issue with Volkanovski being number one because of the fact that he lost a very close fight. Islam being number two, I think that also makes a bit of sense. To me, it's got to be someone who has really not suffered any sort of defeat in the octagon or hasn't really looked human in any of his fights. And I think number one and number two are certainly making that case. While Volkanovski did lose in the main event of UFC 284, it was a close fight. I think the majority of people would agree that even if you scored the fight for Islam, you probably scored it 3 rounds to 2. I did a poll the other day. I did, a couple different things. Even just looking online, you see most people are sort of scoring the fight that way. So if we're going by that, Volk losing a very close fight, and then outside of that, he's never lost in the UFC. And the only other thing you could kind of look at, there's 2 things actually in Volk's career that you could look at. There was the second Max Holloway fight, which some people felt like Volkanovski shouldn't have got the nod in that one, which is understandable. And then there's the Brian Ortega fight where he was nearly submitted, but it didn't matter because Volkanovski survived that submission attempt by Ortega and ended up dominating the rest of the fight. So you look at the record, though, I mean, and just the resume that Volkanovski's had, going from Mendez, former title challenger, Jose Aldo, Max Holloway 3 times, even if you thought that second fight was close, and it maybe should have gone Holloway's way, it was still close enough where, Volkanovski was able to get the win. Brian Ortega is a highly ranked opponent. Forget about the Korean Zombie, just because that was more like a stay busy fight. But, Max Holloway, the last Holloway fight he had, the third one, that was a dominant performance. I think most people would agree that Max Holloway is still at the very top of the featherweight division. So to go out there, dominate him, I think has to count for something. So I don't have an issue with Volkanovski being ranked number one. Now you look at Islam's resume, who's currently ranked number 2. There's a case there as well. Again, he's got 1 loss. And it was back in 2015. I mean, you can't really look at that, as something that would hold him back, although he did technically lose. The issue with Islam, unfortunately, is just the lack of really good opponents, and it's not his fault. I've always been a defender of this. I do get annoyed when I hear people say that, oh, Islam didn't deserve his title shot against Charles. Yes, he did, because he's dominating these guys. He's getting good performances. Saryukin's a very good win that has aged very well. Drew Dober's a top opponent, but really the only quality wins that he's had as far as being in that pound-for-pound conversation, in my opinion, are Charles Oliveira and Volkanovski. That's it. So that's 2 good wins, really, if you think about it. You could put Arman in there as well, but again, Arman's never fought for a title. I think there's still some stuff that Arman has to prove in that division to count that as a win that should be used in this argument for pound. So I don't have an issue with Islam being number 2. If you wanted to make him number 1, I can't agree with you there. Just because, again, for me, if you want to be pound for pound number 1, you got to have more than 2 quality wins, in my opinion. So that's how I'm kind of looking at this. And I know people are going to be upset with me saying this, but that's just the facts. That's how I sort of grade the pound for pound thing. Now, Leon Edwards being number 3, see, I don't agree with that either, because Leon was, losing the majority of the fight with Kamaru Usman. He gets the win. He finishes Usman. He's the first guy to finish him. And I realized Usman himself was highly ranked as well. So that was obviously a very monumental win. But outside of that, I mean, Leon Edwards, if you look at some of his wins, and we're just going to do that here. Should have had this ready, but I didn't. If you look at Leon's wins outside of that, right? Like he's got, Nate Diaz, Bilal, he went to a no contest. You can't even really count that. Dos Anjos, I think, was a good win at the time, but not a lot. So, I don't even agree with Leon Edwards being number 3 here, right? I would put Adesanya ahead of him. I realize Adesanya's lost twice. He lost 1 not in his weight class, and they got knocked out by Pereira. But again, in that Pereira fight, he was winning most of it, and then he gets knocked out. So, see, I would have Adesanya ahead. I get Usman being behind Edwards because Edwards obviously beat him. This is where it gets tricky, guys. Honestly, I don't think there's a clear-cut way to kind of do this, but and even Jamal Hill being number 13, again, Jamal's lost. He lost to Paul Craig. Again, it's sort of tough to sort of decipher all this. I'm not going to go through every one of the rankings, but the debate here is, should Volkanovski be number one? I don't have an issue with it. If Volkanovski got dominated by Islam and he's still number one, fair enough. Probably shouldn't be in the top. If Volkanovski got finished in that fight, shouldn't be at the top, but he lost a close fight. To me, that still should keep him near the top. He moved up a weight class. That should count for something with him sort of taking a risk here. Again, he was, and this is the other thing you guys have to look at as well when it comes to Volkanovski being number one. If you look on the betting odds going into that fight, and we'll bring them up right here, most sports books did not have Volkanovski winning that fight. That has to count for something too. So if you look here at the odds history for Volkanovski, right, it closed as, why don't they have Islam on here? That's really weird. Hold on. Yeah, they don't have the, here, let me just look up 284. Best fight odds. Okay, they should have them here. Okay, here we go. So if you look here, most sports books had Volkanovski as a pretty big underdog here, right? So the fact that he made the fight that close, the fact that some people even feel like Volkanovski did enough to win, I'm not one of them. I thought it was a close fight, but I don't think Volkanovski won. That in itself should count for something too. So I know there's going to be critics of Volkanovski being number one, but you got to remember too, he was not expected to win, and he nearly won. So that's why I don't have an issue with Volkanovski being at the top. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Who do you think should be number one if it's not Volkanovski? If you agree it's Volkanovski, why do you think Volkanovski should be up there? Again, I'm just going by what my criteria is if I was to vote on this. One other thing I'll mention, sorry, before we get out of here, I just remembered. Aaron also mentioned the people who are voting on this. Those wondering how the rankings are determined, according to UFC.com, they are voted on by a weekly panel of comprised media members representing mostly obscure, in some case defunct outlets. He's right about that. The rankings need some work. I'm the first one to admit that. I'm not a rankings panelist, and I have my own reasons for that. I'll just kind of give you the short version. It's just that, you don't get paid to do it. It's just extra work, and then you're never gonna get praise for having a good ranking in the rankings. You're only going to get crapped on. Why would I want to deal with that? I deal with enough as it is with some of the stuff I'm doing. So, but Aaron brings up a good point. The people who are voting on this are not people who are like, regularly at events, or, like Aaron mentioned, some of these outlets I've never even heard of, like, Blood and Sweat. Like, what outlet is that? I have no idea. So that's a greater, maybe I'll do a video on that, on the rankings as a whole. But yeah, so if people want to get upset at how they're doing the rankings, just know that a lot of the people voting on this are not people that are regularly attending events, are interviewing fighters, things of that nature. But again, I don't have an issue with Volkanovski being number one personally. So like I said, we'll try this again. Let me know in the comments what you think. Who do you think should be number one if it's not Volkanovski? If you think it's Islam, explain why you think he should be number one. If it should be someone else, what do you think of the pound for pound rankings? I would love to hear from you guys. Follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at Lynch on Sports, and make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel. And while you're there, hit that like button, hit that notification bell. I'm James Lynch. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.